Skepticism. We encounter it every day. When we buy a used car, if we are the least bit wise, we all exercise some skeptical powers. You could think, here's an honest looking salesperson. I'll just take whatever they offer me at whatever price they wish. But in actuality, you probably think, well, I've heard that occasionally there are small deceptions involved in the sale of a used car, perhaps inadvertent on the part of the salesperson. However, I should be vigilant. You know that some skepticism is required, and you understand why. It's upsetting that you might have to disagree with a used car salesman or ask him questions that he is reluctant to answer. We know that there is at least a small degree of doubt involved in the purchase of a used car, and nobody claims it is especially pleasant having to express such. Much like examining a Sasquatch encounter report, perhaps. There's a good reason for it, because if you don't exercise some minimal skepticism, there's probably some price that you will have to pay later. Then you'll wish that you had made a small investment of skepticism early on. Now, this is not something that you have to go through 4 years of graduate school to understand. Everybody understands this. The trouble is, a used car is one thing, and studying a Sasquatch encounter report or doing a witness interview is another. It seems there are some people who are skeptical in some areas, but unfortunately may not be so in others. My guest today is a great guy, Bill the Skeptic Reid. So, what do you say? Let's get it. This is West Coast Sasquatch Research. Hey, one and all. At this time, I'd like to state that in the last episode, I mentioned Barbara Wasson and the publication of her book, Sasquatch Apparitions. Now, I stated that the book was published in 1971. Actually, it was published in 1979, so I have to express my apologies to the author and her readers. Thank you very much. Now, good day, Bill. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself?
Not too bad at all. I'm glad I could have got a hold of you to do this thing today, because I think it's a very special topic. It's probably the main topic when it comes to Sasquatch research, and it deserves to have a lot of attention paid to it over other things. Now, you're preaching to the choir with me. I know you're a skeptic in your research, as am I. But I just wanted to talk with you about the good, and is there a bad, and is there an ugly, and, skepticism, does it come in for different reasons? People are skeptic about things. So I guess I'll have to ask you, what is skepticism to you? Now, let me preface that by just saying, I envision something like going to a used car lot to buy a used car, and nobody goes in with the attitude that, they're going to take the first car the salesman offers them and they're going to pay him whatever he asks for it, I mean, no, you're going to go there and that you're going to have to, do a bit of parlaying, and you're going to have to inspect the vehicle and ask questions and everything else. And that's skepticism. So how do you feel that applies, I guess, in the Sasquatch, what I call the Sasquatch world? How can people be skeptic in so many parts of their lives, but Bring them into Sasquatch world and they are just believers.
I think, like, for myself, I view skepticism as when somebody brings forward a piece of evidence, I try to look at the evidence to begin with, like, non-judgmental from the beginning. Like, this is just a piece of evidence. Examine it. Wherever the evidence leads me, that will become my conclusion. So if I look at a piece of evidence and at the end of it, I said, okay, this is evidence for the existence of Sasquatch, then that's where it'll sort of wind up in my mental bucket. If I look at it and go, well, no, that's either A, nothing to do with Sasquatch, or B, it's unconvincing to me, it goes into that bucket. So really, for me, all that skepticism means is when I look at a piece of evidence, I do not have a preconceived notion. I just let the evidence lead me to the conclusion that it will.
So we can agree that skepticism is a good thing. Do you think there's any cases where skepticism might be a bad thing?
Sure. Once again, it goes back to people's preconceived notions. Everybody has their own point of view and their own worldview. And as much as we try as researchers to step out of our worldview and be neutral, we do have some preconceived notions. And I know for myself, like, I don't believe in anything paranormal.
No.
And I know if somebody comes forward and starts talking about mind speak or interdimensional portholes and that sort of thing, I immediately go into, I'm really not going to give this my undivided attention. And at the end of the day, who knows? Maybe that's not doing the subject justice. I don't think so. I think that it's correct, but we do bring our own bias into it. And you also see it in other researchers I've seen where they've said, in their belief, Sasquatch is a higher primate or a hominid. And then as soon as somebody else mentions anything forest people or human-like, they automatically discount that. And I will do that to a certain extent when somebody's talking about, oh, Sasquatch are more intelligent than us. Well, if they're that intelligent, why is there no evidence of technology? And to me, lack of evidence of technology would mean that they are not human level intelligence.
Well, I mean, yeah, I have to agree with you. There's different forms of intelligence, and there's wily intelligence, human intelligence, wily intelligence in the way of animals. Two of the most intelligent creatures on Earth are the chimpanzee and your North American crow. They're the only two animals in the world that use tools. So I mean, there's a level of intelligence right there. I was quite amazed to learn that about crows. Crows will take twigs or sticks, put them in their beak, and root away at holes and cracks and crevices in trees, trying to get insects out. Nothing else does that. Nothing uses tools to extend their body. So maybe Sasquatch is a very intelligent creature, but intelligent on an animal level, not a human level. I don't know. That's subject for a different show, I guess.
Well,
I heard someone. I'll go ahead, Bill.
Just to be clear, like, when I said, intelligence, I'm talking at when people they're saying they're forest people that are much smarter than us. I mean, they could very possibly be, if they are a primate, chimpanzee level intelligence. But this whole idea of a forest people with, human level or greater intelligence, to me, is just not realistic, given that they have no technology. or no known technology.
Mm, yeah. So we're talking about a society, would you say? A society of these creatures?
No, I'm thinking of things like use of fire, uh,
Okay.
tools. I mean, they if they do exist, they may throw rocks, they may throw sticks, which is again chimpanzee or primate behavior. But to achieve human level of intelligence, I mean, it's possible, because it's possible that some of the dolphins, are much smarter than chimpanzees, and they don't have technology, and it may be due to their echolocation and that sort of thing. But for Sasquatch, if they exist, I think they're a primate and somewhere around chimpanzee level intelligence.
Tell me something. I heard someone mention this the other day, and it sort of stuck with me because it's not my truth. I don't know if it's your truth, but I heard them say that. I'll ask you, do you think that anybody who gets upset when they encounter skepticism about their story, if they get all out of sorts about it and upset because somebody's asking them questions, do you think that that's a sign that the person is lying?
No, and the reason is I have excuse me, my one brother-in-law had a sighting in the early 80s, and I believe him 100% that he believes he saw a Sasquatch. And I've known him since he was in kindergarten, since 1973. And to him, when the fact that I do not believe in Sasquatch, he finds it insulting. His position is, I know him. I know he's not a liar. Therefore, when he says he's seen one, I should believe that he saw one. And he's not able to distinguish the fact that I can believe that he thinks he saw a Sasquatch and have the idea that I wasn't there, so I don't know what he saw. And he can't distinguish that from his personal belief that he did see one. So, no, I think, sometimes when people get upset with you, it's because you're not believing the lie. But I also think that with some people, especially like with my brother-in-law, he's a black and white type of person. There's no shades of gray. Everything is black and white. And so with him, there's just, you know me, I don't lie. I saw it, therefore you should believe it. And he can't focus in on other people that go, no, there's shades of gray there.
Yeah, but I think that, does knowing the person make it harder to be skeptical? I mean, you touched on it. You said just the fact that, you know this person, they're coming to you and they got, their character reference and everything else, as opposed to talking to somebody you never met before in your life. Does that have any effect upon your outlook on the information that these people are trying to give you? You know one person, you don't know the other.
If you're not careful, it can, and that's where, when I say earlier on when I said everyone has their worldview and their point of reference, is it can be difficult to step out of yourself and look at it neutrally. One of the things I look at when I'm interviewing people is, I try to learn as much as I can about them. And because when you're doing your thought process, you're looking at things like, misidentification, of course. You're looking at things like lying. You're looking at, possible substance abuse, mental issues, which, obviously in an hour or 2 hour interview, you're not going to have a full view of it. But those are sort of things you look at. Like I have a couple of people that I've met that have great witness accounts that I think if Sasquatches exist, they 100% saw it, and it's based upon um, really their skill set, their experience, and what they do. But no, you are right. It can get difficult when it's somebody you know to step aside. Like in my brother-in-law's case, he had a witness with him. Now, the witness that was with him um, is well known for tall tales. So
Okay.
for myself, if the other witness had come forward independently, I would have had a hard time not discounting it out of hand just because of his reputation. So it is difficult to sometimes to step out of that.
Could you tell me about their encounter? What exactly happened?
Okay, now I'll have to preface it with a little bit of background information for you because it
Okay.
is pertinent. So his older brother at the time was 6'6" and about 350 pounds. His brother did peak out at just over 500 before he had surgery. His brother also wore size 17 boots. His dad, my father-in-law, was 6'4", about 300 pounds, built similar to John Wayne. In his younger
Mm-hmm.
days, he was about 275. So, and now Dave is your average 5'9" guy, so he wasn't big. So what happened is Dave has been hunter, fisherman, hiking, camping his whole life. So he and this Rick were on a bear hunt, and it was a nice sunny day like today, and excuse me, it was early afternoon, and they were driving down a logging road. And I'll sort of give you the way Dave explained it, so where he gets his aha moment. So he said, as they're driving down the road, he sees this bear on 2 feet walk across the road in front of them. He immediately hits the brakes. They get out of the truck, run down to where they saw the bear walk in front of them. As he's looking around, he sees this large human footprint that is much bigger than his brother's size 17. So he's looking at that. Then he hears a noise and he looks into the bush and he sees a bear on its hind legs walking through the bush. He said he saw it for about 5 to 7 seconds. And when he tells the story, he says, he was looking at, the bear walking away on 2 legs, looking down at the big human footprint, thinking about the bear that just walked away. And he said it was like a pin drop, like, wait a sec, that wasn't a bear.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a human footprint. And he and Rick immediately had, not a sense of dread, but it was like, we got to get out of here. They got back to their truck, drove off. Now, this was in the early 80s, so there was no cell phones with pictures or anything like that. So he didn't have a camera on him. Now, he did go back the next day with a little Instamatic, but he was unable to find the footprint from the day before.
Mm-hmm.
But so in his case, when I look at the balance of probabilities, when I examine it, first thing I look at is he a truthful person or not? Well, he doesn't lie, so I can say he I have a good confidence that he didn't lie to me. Second thing is could it be misidentification? Well, here's a guy that's had hunted since he was, I don't know, 10 years old, and he was 19 or 20 at this time. So, hunted basically his whole life. He'd fished his whole life. He'd seen numerous bears, and in fact, he was out bear hunting. And he's, to this day, he hunts and fishes, and he's still adamant that what he saw was not a bear, that it was a Sasquatch. So misidentification is not a likely scenario. And again, he knows what a size 17 footprint looks like. He knows what a 6'6", 350-pound man looks like. And he said what he saw was at least a head taller than his brother. So then you look at impairment. Well, this what he was brought up when you're around guns, no drinking. I think he's a social drinker anyways, but so he wasn't drinking, not that day, not the day before. Doesn't use any mind-altering drugs. It wasn't on any over-the-counter medication, so there's nothing like that. Again, he was wide awake. It wasn't a matter of him being overtired, mental impairment from being overtired, sick, or anything like that. So when you look at all the boxes, every box that could possibly be for not being a legitimate sighting, none of those boxes are checked. There's, it's not misidentification. It's not untruthfulness or, highly unlikely. So when you go down it, you have to say, okay, if Sasquatch exists, he saw one. If Sasquatch don't exist, then I don't have an explanation for what he saw.
But you say that there was a corroborating witness.
Yes.
What was this person's story? Did they see? Did they see anything?
They saw the creature walk across the road. They saw the footprint. They heard it go through the bush, but they didn't. He didn't get the second look.
Mm-hmm. But that adds value to the story. Having a corroborating witness say that, yes, I saw pretty much the same thing.
Yeah, yes, it does. But and again, the one and normally speaking, having more than one witness does help. But the one thing when you have more than one witness, you have to worry. You have to worry about groupthink. And
I follow you. You have to worry about how many times did they discuss this between themselves before one got around to being interviewed, and as you say, groupthink. Did someone start to take on effects from another person's version of what happened, or does that muddy the waters that they had time? I'm not saying they did, but I'm just putting it out there in general, that witnesses had time to be able to compare notes before they talked to a researcher about it.
And it can, and that's where you have to try to be careful. And I know in his case, once again, going back to his personality being a black and white type of person in his worldview, his father had a sighting back in the late 50s, early 60s, and Dave used to always make fun of him and say, you were probably drunk or whatever. And when Dave had his sighting, one of the first things he did, is he was still living at home then, is he drove home and apologized to his dad for making fun of him all those years. So I mean, again, there was some, and again, because I've known the family since 1973, I knew the information, within a day or two. So that does cut down on the likelihood of the witnesses discussing it.
Yes.
But you are right. Especially if you're interviewing people months or years after the fact, you don't know really. Now you're getting independent witness statements, or you're getting an amalgamation of their discussions over the years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I was going to say that after listening to that, I ask you, what's the definition of being skeptical? Is it being doubtful about the story that you're hearing, or is it just you trying to resolve something by approaching it from the story from a different angle, maybe to bring out something that they missed in telling their story? Or is it both? You're doubtful and you want more information.
I don't think doubtful is the right term, because if you're doubtful, then you're not looking at the evidence properly, in my opinion.
That's
It's
right. Then you're
you're
calling the
looking,
witness a liar.
or when you even if it's I like to come in from the neutral position, and it's like, maybe this is a bad analogy, but it's like when you go watch a horror movie and you suspend your disbelief
Mm-hmm.
so that you could see stuff. Well, again, I don't believe Sasquatch exists, but when I'm interviewing someone, I suspend, or I attempt to suspend, my disbelief. So I don't come at it looking at from a doubtful position. I try as best I can to be absolutely neutral, look at the evidence that they present neutrally, and then see where that leads me. So again, in Dave's case, when I look at on the balance of probabilities, he's being truthful, and he saw something that he believed to be Sasquatch. And if Sasquatch exists, then he saw one. Where why I don't believe in Sasquatch is because I look at the evidence in totality that's out there, and lack of evidence, and basically put it on a balance of probabilities. And for me, and this is again how much, and this is where your worldview comes into effect, is how much credence do you put into witness statements? Now, a lot of people that base their belief on Sasquatch, they base it a lot on, there's 2,000 or 3,000 reports a year. They're similar, therefore something must exist. For myself, for concrete evidence, I view sightings as hearsay. It's not the concrete proof that I personally need to lead me to belief in Sasquatch. I don't, so it's not doubting the person. It's looking at it from a neutral position, and then base my decision on the interview.
Mm-hmm. What does one say when they're skeptical about something and they get feedback from other people telling them that they should be more open-minded and stop being so critical? What do you say to a person who takes that approach? Why are you so skeptical? You should be open-minded. Give the person a break, yada yada.
Well, and again, this is a simple question with a wide range of answers. When you look at when the person says you need to be more open-minded, that, again, to my way of thinking, really depends on the person. On some people, when they are saying you need to be more open-minded, what they're actually telling you is, I believe in something. I can present little or no evidence to convince you, but just because I believe in it, no matter how absurd it may be, you need to believe in it. And then the other end of the spectrum, you can have somebody that has looked, and I'm fully prepared to say that somebody could look at the exact same evidence that I have over the years and reach a different conclusion. So I can understand at the other end of the spectrum, somebody that's researched, as being that neutral, and then when the evidence has led them to believe that Sasquatch exists, they could say to me, you know what? You think you're open-minded, you think that you're giving this evidence a fair shake, but I've looked at the same evidence. I've come to the different conclusion. I think it's you just not really being neutral, really being open-minded. So there's a wide range in that statement. And there's also a wide range that you can discuss. If you get somebody that approaches you from the, you know, you need to be more open-minded just because I believe in portals and mind speak and everything. And the only reason that you don't believe is because you have a defective brain and you won't believe this stuff. Well, if you're talking to somebody like that, there's no point.
That's a losing battle.
Yeah, you're not going to have a debate with them, because it's just going to be a belief versus critical thinking argument, and you're never going to change somebody's mind. On the other hand, if you have somebody that is reasonable, looked at, is evidence-based, and has simply reached a different conclusion than you have, when you have that discussion, you can sometimes learn some valuable stuff. And you might actually find in the discussion that, hey, maybe they're right. Maybe in this instance, I didn't look at it critically. I didn't look at it neutrally. So there can be value in that. So really the discussion can be a time waster, or it can be quite valuable depending on the person that you have an interaction with.
Yeah, well, over the years, read a lot of reports and went out and got some reports, and you're basically dealing with somebody else's reality, is the way I look at it. There was another case. There was a case that you investigated with the Steenberger, and I found that one. I found it curious and very interesting because at the time it happened, I was only camped about a half kilometer away, and I never knew anything about it till 2 weeks after the fact. And that's where this lady, nobody mentions where it took place. I don't mind mentioning where it took place, but this lady claims that she saw a Sasquatch in the park. It's a campsite that holds about 60 or so spaces for camping, and it's they have a caretaker, and you have to pay for your camping things up front. I know the caretaker. I know the area very well. And could you tell me a little bit about that report?
Okay, now just to be clear, I didn't go to the physical location. Thomas and Brad Trent, another one of our researchers, they
Okay.
were there. Unfortunately, but I was involved in the after. Unfortunately, I happened to be up at 70 Mile when Thomas got the call, and I didn't get back to town till the next day. But I am very familiar with it, and I can tell you if you want to hear the story.
Sure. First of all, I never asked this question of Thomas. How did he get a call? Who called him?
The lady herself called. So basically, the series of events went. On the Saturday, the woman had what she believed was a sighting about 10 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
She phoned Thomas that night at approximately 6:30 p.m.
How did she hear about Thomas? Do you know?
She looked on she did a Google search and came up with his number. I
Oh,
believe
okay.
she actually found his number through your West Coast Sasquatch group, but
Yeah,
I might be
probably.
mistaken
Yeah.
on that part.
Yeah, because I found it interesting that that like I said, I never heard anything about it for weeks, but I'm Thomas gets a phone call. I'm always ribbing him about the signs on the side of his truck. I said, "Do you think those things pay off, or is it?" Why don't you spend some money and just go in and get something done at a sign shop?
Well, I'll tell you, I was parked at a logging road with him one time, on more than one occasion, and I've had somebody whip by, see his signs, and stop to talk to him and tell him of a sighting. So they do have some value in that regard.
Oh, they do. They do. It's like just like Bill Miller used to go around with Bill Miller, and people would see Sasquatch investigations or tours or whatever on the side of his UTV, and they would just come up and just start a conversation with him about Sasquatch. I mean, uh, it works. Advertising works, and but anyway, let's get back to this story as you know it.
Okay. So then Thomas and Brad met the lady the next, on the Sunday at 10, around 10:30 a.m. So it was basically 24 and a half hours after her sighting. So what originally happened, her and her, I can't remember if it was her boyfriend or husband, they were on this small dock together. And she took some pictures with her cell phone. Now it's unclear because in her original phone conversation, with Thomas, she said she saw the Sasquatch, or it appeared that she saw the Sasquatch in the photo. The next day when they met, her story was a little bit different, and that she had saw the Sasquatch and took the photos. So there was a little bit of change there. Now, the beauty of this sighting was it had very good landmarks. It was a small wharf, so she was able to take Thomas to the exact point that she was standing. Then her sighting was, as she described it, there was a T intersection in the trail, and she saw the figure come down the main trail and turn left and go up the side trail. So because it was, a nice T intersection that was, the one trail is about 8-10 feet wide, and the other trail beside it that comes off it is about 6 feet wide. It was a real good indicator of the positions of both the people and the figure. So when she first told the story to Thomas, it was a figure. Now, when they got there the next day and were discussing it, and this leads to some of the skepticism, she had started talking about being able to see the different facial features and describe what the face looked like. Now, based upon the position she would have been and the figure she would have been at, it would have been impossible to see those facial features without binoculars or something like that. So basically, her story was she saw it come down, walk the trail, make a left, and then go up the other trail and disappear. So she did give Thomas, had emailed Thomas some photos that she had taken of the figure, and luckily enough, at the intersection there was a tree that had a branch that came across the trail, so it gave it again a good height marker between the height of the figure and the height of this limb. So she had taken the picture with an iPhone 5. So after they did the interview and the lady left, Brad Trent had an iPhone 5, so they decided to recreate the pictures. So they had, at one point, Brad standing on the wharf where the lady was, and Thomas stood, walked through that intersection, and then they reversed it with Thomas taking the pictures and Brad doing the walk. And what they found when they compared the photos is the figure certainly was no taller than Thomas, and actually looked like it was slightly shorter than Thomas. And Thomas is about 5'9". So the figure wasn't large, wasn't massive. It was human shaped. When you looked at her photo, it really looked to me, and I've seen the blown up photos, it looked to me like it was somebody in a hoodie. And anyways, when Thomas was discussing with the lady, what she saw and went through the whole thing, he basically, said to her that he believed it was a case of misidentification, which she seemed to reluctantly agree with, and her husband or boyfriend, um, he thought it was misidentification, but he said he didn't get a clear look, but it didn't make sense that basically mid-morning in a crowded parking lot, or sorry, parking uh, municipal park, that a Sasquatch would be walking down a main trail. So after the fact, Thomas interviewed the park caretaker and some other people in the area, and nobody saw anything strange. Nobody's dogs were barking unnecessarily. So at the end, it was pretty clear that on the balance of probabilities, it was mistaken identity. He doesn't think that the woman was lying at all, but he does believe that she wanted it to be, in her mind, she wanted it to be a Sasquatch. So that's what it became. And then later on, just to add a twist to the story, when Finding Bigfoot was doing their episode on BC versus Washington, which area is more squatchy, well, they had contacted Thomas, and Thomas gave them the names of a bunch of people he had interviewed over the years. After he had cleared it with them first, that he could give their names to Finding Bigfoot, and the lady was one of them. And they did do the interview of her on it, and of course, Finding Bigfoot said that, oh, she most definitely saw a Sasquatch.
God bless the BFRO.
I don't know if it's a BFRO. I tend to think there's some good researchers in there, but I think it was God bless Animal Planet and the production crew.
It's yeah, there, if not now, but there were good researchers in the BFRO, many of them who have left the BFRO many years ago because they didn't like the direction that it was taking, and what was considered evidence and not evidence, I guess you could say. There was a disagreement over that. And that was years ago. Where they are today, who knows? How long have you had an interest in the Sasquatch? How many years?
Well, my first book on Sasquatch was given to me by my grandmother, and it was on the track of Sasquatch, and I was fortunate enough to have John Green sign it a few years before he passed. But my grandmother gave me that book in 1974, and I'd already been interested in Sasquatch for a few years before then. So
so you've been keeping an eye on this for a while, checking the pulse of the situation as it goes on. I've the same with me. I mean, I came across Sasquatch at the bottom of a wood box in a cabin. It was an old Argosy magazine, and it had the PG film on the cover. And that I was a teenager then, and I thought, holy mackerel, I'm glad we don't have anything like that here, you know. And it wasn't until I came to BC and I finally got around to meeting John Green. Well, since then, it's been about 19 years that I've been involved in squatching one way or another, or Sasquatch research, I should say. And so I wanted to ask you, why do you think people go there? I mean, I'm going on 19 years now, and I scratch my head till this day about it. So I'll ask you, you can answer the tough questions. Why do you think people go there, like this lady seeing a person in a hoodie on a sunny day goes, Sasquatch, Sasquatch, you know? I mean, I go into the forest a fair bit. I'm out there, I camp a lot. And when I see or hear something strange or unusual, Sasquatch never enters my mind. That's the last thing I would ever think of.
I think it's the mystery and the excitement, like, and just speaking for myself, when I first, when I was a kid, I mean, I was like in 74, I was 11 years old, or sorry, I was 9 years old, get my math right. Um, to me, it was just like that excitement that it could be something out there. And I got in, when I first got into myself into looking after Sasquatch, I was 100% convinced they were real. I read all of John Green's books. And to be
Mm-hmm.
honest with you, I thought at that time, within 10 years, they'd be pulling one out of the bush and putting in a zoo. And I think, if you're somebody that believes that Sasquatch exists and there's that mystery, you you want to be part of it. You want to be part of the cool kids club, whether you think that on subconsciously or unconsciously, or sorry, consciously or subconsciously. I think that's with some people, but I do think there are other people out there that when they've seen that, from what they see, they legitimately believe they saw a Sasquatch. There's many people that said they never thought about Sasquatch or didn't know much about it, till their event happened. So I think again, you have that a wide range of people. You have some on one end that they're looking for that excitement. They're looking for that, I'm special because I had this encounter, all the
Yeah.
way to people that see something and they just have no explanation for.
Yeah, I guess it's that runs the gamut from being borderline skeptical. I guess you can be skeptical about yourself, can you?
Well, I
But
mean, Shakespeare said to thine own self be true. And I think that's what, as researchers, we have to do. And I think, I once, I was being interviewed, and somebody sarcastically said, you know, Bill's going to need to have his own sighting to believe it. And I'm going to get this T-shirt made up one day, I swear. This other lady said something and I thought was just brilliant. Said that, if Bill ever sees a Sasquatch, he's going to have to give it a hug so he can check it for zippers. I just thought, brilliant. But I think that's what we as people researchers is, if we see something that we believe, whether it's Sasquatch, paranormal, anything like that, the first thing you need to do is take a step back, sort of step out of your own skin and say, okay, if I was an interviewer interviewing me that was neutral and I went and asked these questions, what would I say? And if you can honestly say to yourself, given what I saw or heard, if I was a neutral person asking these questions, I would say, yes, they saw something. Then you can probably have a high degree of confidence in yourself that you saw something.
well, I
But
mean,
if
yeah. I'm
you
sorry.
don't
Go
have that
ahead.
ability, if you don't have that ability to do that, and you just, automatically go to, wow, great, I saw something. Well, then you, if you were really to, you're not self-analyzing, you're not looking at what you actually saw. You've automatically gone from a position of, I believe, to, I've now had some evidence that I've immediately concluded supports my belief system. And that's, and there's nothing that we can do with that, is we just have to acknowledge it. I don't know if I explained myself right there, but I think there's some people that believe in it supports their belief system. So they're not gonna analyze it at all. They're gonna take it at face value. Yep, that was what I thought it was. I know what I know now.
So they're not going to do a lot of soul searching on about the subject or whatever. They're just, you see, a lot of researchers till this day get the bad rep that researchers are the worst of the bunch. They believe in anything and everything. they'll swallow the Kool-Aid and everything they see or encounter is Sasquatch related or whatever. And I don't know where this attitude comes from, because I know researchers. I'm a researcher. Uh, there are good researchers out there and there are bad researchers out there. And there are some researchers who end up being hoaxers. May they rot in hell. But I just don't understand this general opinion. I guess it's pretty jaded. The whole Sasquatch world is kind of jaded, you know. Um, what do you think? Do you think that one's skepticism can be based not on the facts, or on the facts, or even lack of facts, but one's own prejudices, such as religion or political reasons or whatever, can impair a person? Well, I'm saying, okay, if you're driving down the street and something walks in front of you and you deny, or someone else tells you it happened to them, and you deny it because, say, it's against your religious grounds to believe that God made a creature so much like in the image of man or whatever. I'm just rambling here. I'm getting to the point that is, can religion play a part in your prejudices if you're a researcher, say?
Oh, yes, there's all sorts of things that can play into that. An example, I was on a Facebook group on Sasquatch research last week, and somebody made a post, uh, Bigfoot isn't real, get over it. Well, and this person, claims to be a researcher. Well, how are you going to have an intelligent debate with somebody like that?
That was trolling, but nobody wants to admit it.
Well, yeah, and I mean, and again, I do not believe Sasquatch exists, but that stuff still bothers me, because I think, we need to have an open and honest dialogue that tries to support the facts. But there are things, like there are some people that, because of their religious view, say that, it's impossible for Sasquatch to exist. There's other people that, say that they're they're Nephilim, the angels that have come, the watchers that have come to earth. So they'll use that part of religion. So it's again, it's our each one of us have our own worldview. And it's when we do our research, we have to do our best to step out of it, but we are victim to our own worldview to greater or lesser degrees. And if you're somebody that believes that, I've saw, talked to people that believe that Sasquatch are demons, and because of their religious views, and I don't, believe that. But again, you're limited to the conversation you can have with them, because they have their religious convictions, and there's that's that. And but I also know, I do know a couple of born again Christians that believe in Sasquatch. They don't know, and they say they don't know what it is, but in their interpretation, it's still possible. So I don't think religion itself prevents a belief in Sasquatch existence. I think it's a person's individual belief system that dictates that.
Is it up to the skeptic who is encountering warning flags in a report to change the mind of the reporter? I mean, to make them think that they're mistaken in some way in what they saw, whether it's a vocalization report or a visual report. I mean, should a skeptic debunk without a very good reason. I guess what I'm talking here is skepticism, bullying. Do people just do it just to the other person?
Well, there is that there is that element. There are people out there that are trolls and bullies. I mean, I used to spend some time on the old BFF forum, which I haven't in. I go on there every once in a while, but I don't go on there. But there is guys on there that I honestly don't understand why they're on there, because all they seem to want to do is make fun of people, and or as best make derogatory comments, and that's not skepticism. That is
It's cyberbullying.
it's cyberbullying. And when I get a report, and again, this is individual based. If I'm talking to somebody and I think there's a reasonable uh, alternate explanations for what they saw, as part of the conversation, you find out how open they are for that discussion. If they are 100%, I know this, I believe this, these are the facts, no question, then trying to give them alternate explanations is going to be a waste of your time. However, if you see somebody that's reasonable and you think that that there's going to be it's going to be a benefit to have that discussion with them, you have it with them. And it really it depends upon your skills as an interviewer to sort of figure out what that person's like. And again, you can't be wrong about them. But if somebody comes up to me and they're 100% sure that they had a Sasquatch sighting, and if I start going down the road of alternate explanations, that they're not listening, and they know what they know and that's it, then what's the point of trying to convince them? They're not going to be convinced, and the only thing you may do is take a mutually beneficial report and interaction and turn it into confrontational, which serves no purpose. But if the person is open to other explanations, then by all means, give them, and maybe when you're talking to them, they might be able to show to you that your alternate explanation is unlikely. And that's where, as the interviewer and the skeptic, again, you have to be honest and say, I don't know everything. So maybe if you say something along the lines of, oh, that sounded, for argument's sake, you say, are you sure that wasn't a cougar that you heard, or whatever? And they come back and say, well, no, I don't think so, because, and maybe when they give you your explanation, you're going, yeah, you're right. So, again, it's if you get into it thinking you know everything, or that you're smarter than the other person, then you're not doing proper research, and you're also not doing yourself any favors.
Mm, I sort of think you mentioned about a person who is not gullible, but to me, the opposite of being skeptical is somebody who you just mentioned, who is adamant in their own mind that they know certain truths and facts that others do not. And being challenged by a skeptic will not change their mind. To me, that's the opposite of a skeptic. Somebody who's a solid block that believes what they believe, and you can ask your questions, but I'm not going to detract from what I know as facts. In other words, not very pliable at all in the way of gaining information, further information from them. I guess it's a self-defense mechanism on their part, maybe.
It can be, because when we talk to people, a lot of times we talk to them, it's months or years after. That was actually Thomas phoning that in the background.
Go to work, Thomas.
But I've got I don't know if you ever saw the movie Brave Wilderness, but I've got a ringtone set where they discover the Bigfoot coming out of the cave just before they shoot it. It's a comedy, and it's anyways. But
we're Sasquatch nerds
yeah,
because on my phone I've got a Chehalis recording of a howl. It's an actual howl that was recorded by some indigenous people over there about 5 months ago. And I got my hands on a copy, and I said, that's going on my cell phone. So they get this big roar and static and roar. And I think it's neat anyway. My wife thinks I'm crazy, but what the hell?
well,
It's
I'm lucky. My wife believes in Sasquatch, so she thinks I'm crazy for different reasons. But um, no, I think when you're going back to the person that is adamant in their beliefs,
yeah,
um, we sometimes we talk to people months or years after they've had their sighting, and I think with some people it's become a defensive mechanism because they may have told friends or family and got laughed at. I mean, my brother-in-law, when he told the story, he's told it back in 80 or 81, whenever it was. And because, people making fun of him, he stopped talking about it. And
yeah,
it was about 5 years ago, 6 years, oh, I guess longer than that, about 7 years ago now, where, we were just sitting down talking one day, and I'd actually been talking about Thomas and I and a couple other guys going out doing a research outing the day before. He goes, well, you remember my sighting, don't you? And I was like, not really, refresh my memory. And then it was, he told it. And I think that's part of why he is so defensive about it is, he was laughed at. So when somebody, when you tell a story honestly, and you're trying to be honest, and people are responding by making fun of you or being dismissive of what you've seen, I think you could develop that that wall around you that this is what I saw. I know what I saw. I've heard crap like that coming from people like you before. I'm done with it. Now you also have the others that are just know-it-all. Their normal personality is I know everything. I'm smarter than you. Blah blah blah. And I've seen it. I'm not listening to anything you have to say. And again, it runs a gamut. I mean, I remember I know you've talked to Pat Turner, and him and I get in a little bit of debate about the Sasquatch phenomenon. And I truly agree with him that Sasquatch phenomenon in itself, regardless of whether a creature exists or not, there's a phenomenon there that's been going on for decades about people seeing it. And at the end of the day, if we ever figure out the truth behind the phenomenon, it's not going to be a simple answer. There's going to be multiple answers and multiple reasons. And it's the same thing whenever we're interacting with witnesses, is there's going to be a huge gamut between from the hoaxer to someone that is absolutely 100% convinced they saw what they saw. There's going to be a huge range in between there, huge range of personalities in there. And we as researchers have to be aware of that. We have to try to use techniques to best deal with those people. And regardless, at the end, we may think hoaxer, or we may think, hey, if something, if Sasquatch exists, they saw it. We need to be open. We need to be honest. And in our notes, in our private notes, we put write it in our book. It's perfectly acceptable to go, hey, this guy's a BS artist, or another one go, I really would have loved to have seen that, being there when that person saw what they saw.
I brought it up at the beginning of the podcast about can skepticism be a bad thing? And I think in some cases it can. Uh, uh, Not for the research value itself, but for the psychological value, shall we say, about the people who are putting forth their reports. Many of them are warned. Being, an old hand at the forums and everything, and Bigfoot forums, I spent 10 years there as Grand Cherokee. And many people who come forward for the first time with their reports, sort of tentatively pushing the paper across the table at you and jumping back to see what you think of it. Many of those people have been warned by others, do not put your report on the internet, because if you do that, you better be ready to be torn apart, because there's people out there like mad dogs who will pounce on you. And it's true. Thank God there's not many of them. You mentioned yourself about some people that are, attack dogs for fresh meat. And so you you can understand somebody being upset when they're being just, skeptized, if that's a word, to death, and nobody to turn to, nobody who understands what you're going through. I've seen that, of course, in real life as well, just not on the internet. I asked Thomas about that in a podcast I did with him. Did you ever worry about a witness afterwards because this shook them up so much? Did you ever pick up the phone a month later? And we got into an incident that did happen along those lines. But it makes me feel that we as researchers, with our little amount of power, whatever it is, can have a startling effect on those who are doing or making the reports. So, in a nutshell, do you think there's times that your skepticism should be pulled back? Do you think
No,
there's times
and and,
that,
and I don't, and I think you're mixing up behaviors with skepticism. You have to remember, a lot of those people that are on the internet that are attacking people, they're not researchers, and it's not skepticism that's driving them. It's it's their own belief system. They're either a troll or a bully. It's the same thing as sort of the opposite, but you get people that'll put their story on the internet. Somebody will ask a legitimate question, and then that person gets all offended, and they oh, I'm being attacked, where they clearly weren't attacked. I think skepticism is that point of being neutral, analyzing it. As soon as you get into behavior where you're telling somebody, uh, you know, all you have there is pareidolia, is when you're making statements of fact to somebody that you really don't have the position of fact, and it's your opinion. You're not being skeptical. You are being a bully or a troll, but it's not skepticism. That's putting your own belief on people. And and a lot of those people, especially on the internet, they're not researchers. They some of them just like making fun of people. Some of them, for whatever you meet these people in everyday life. But I don't think it's skepticism that's driving it. It's something. It's a personality defect with them that's causing them to attack other people for no reason. But again, there's a difference between asking legitimate questions and attacking. And there's also, you do get research to get fed up, and it's hard to fight, where you see people putting pictures on day in, day out with red circles around stuff that is clearly pareidolia, and or a stump, and when you ask simple questions like, hey, did you go back, the next day and take a picture of the same area? Or,
yep,
hey, that's one, that's one picture out of a trail cam. Normally the trail cams will take a burst of 2 or 3 photos, whereas the previous photos are the ones after it. And so there is that level. Like I was on, and I kid you not, I was on a site and I had to leave because it was just like too nuts. This guy had a photo in which, and he was from Australia, in which he claimed in the photo that there was a Yowie,
Yep.
there was a 6-foot alien creature stepping out of a porthole, there was a Sasquatch, and a witch, all in one photo. And you had people fawning after him, going, "Oh, you're so brave for being out there." But on his group, if anyone so much as questioned any of his photos, they were banned.
They were banned. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I was on a Bigfoot, or sorry, a Dogman research group, which claimed to be scientific based, and they found a body that, or body parts, it was basically 12 bones they found of this individual that died at a campsite, and they found him a year after the fact. Well, this woman had a feeling that a dog man decapitated this guy in the middle of the night. And she had this feeling. So I brought forward a couple, that's probably not what it was. Somebody came up and said, wolves don't do this, right? So then I linked to stories of verified accounts of wolves doing exactly what he said they didn't do. Then they said, "Oh, wolves don't do, it wasn't wolves because they don't do this." So then I brought, and these are all stories within the last 10 years that were verifiable. And then, people said, "Oh, well, and, scavengers don't remove heads." So then I taught, I didn't post it, but I gave them links saying, "Here's pictures of animals scavengers taking the heads of animals that are human size away." I said, "Here's some links to some sites on serial killer body dump sites. Everything that is happening in here can be explained by normal scavenging behavior." And even the reporter said, the biologist that was at the scene said there was a lot of blood at the scene, but not enough blood to say that the person was killed. It was blood that would probably be spread by a scavenger with a dead body. The admin of that group called me a troll.
Yeah. No
Because I was
logic
already,
allowed.
So I ended up leaving that group. But so, there's two sides of it. Obviously we should not allow bullying of any type. Legitimate questions should be encouraged. And the other thing we have to do is on both sides is remember that when we're on the internet, we could type things that may sound more harsh than what we really mean them to be. So I like to give people the benefit of the doubt if we're talking and they say something that I think is either rude or harsh. I'll usually give them the opportunity to explain it because maybe they didn't intend it to be that way. And I think, some of the harshness that we get on the internet is unintentional. But, I think the majority of it, or a good portion of it, is because somebody can be faceless. There's no consequences to their actions. You do get that cyberbullying.
Oh, for certain. For certain. It's forums and chat rooms and such things are not the best places for communicating, even though that's what it's all about. Because you cannot see the other person's body language. You can't see their face. You cannot see if they're smirking, laughing, or winking. Well, thank God for smileys, I guess. But and yes, it's easy to get offended in those places, and it's easy to offend other people.
I have left groups for that particular reason, and I actually I sort of stepped away from Sasquatch for about 10 years, and that was in my early 20s. And I didn't step away totally from it. I stopped the hands-on research, and I just stayed newspaper articles, internet, that sort of thing. And part of it was because I I went from believing in Sasquatch to not believing in Sasquatch. And then some of it was just the pure lunacy that we sometimes deal with. And I just said, plus I was raising a family at the time. My kids were young, and, you know, you have to do what you have to do to, when you're we have a family. And oddly enough, how I got back into it, now I met Thomas, was I was debating a person, excuse me, over the old mission hoax from 1977.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, okay, this guy is just a nut bar. And I saw Thomas before, saw his signs on his truck. So I had phoned him, and he said, "Oh, I got some information to give you." And that's how I met him. I went down to his place, met him, and then he
He's
helped me. But the person that I was having the quote unquote debate with, he was just a nut bar, and I wasted my time and effort. But for whatever reason, that sort of brought me back into it. So I don't know.
Yeah, I have much the same story as you. I left for about 6 years, and I ended up coming back. I left because I used to take this so personally. I would talk to these wing nuts and these fringe believers, and they would get me angry when I would get off the computer or whatever. And I said, this is really getting to you. It's time for you to take a break. You're getting angry at people you don't even know,
And
you're
and that
letting them rule your life.
and that's the thing is and this is where you have to look after your own mental health. And that is, for some of these people, and Thomas always says, with some of these people it's a religion, and for some of them it really is. But for your own mental well-being, you can't take things personal. If somebody says to you, "Oh, you're just closed-minded," or anything like that, or any one of the dozen other things they'll call you, like a big one in the Bigfoot world is they'll call you a scophic. You just scoff at everything. Well, that's just an insult, And my belief is the only opinion that's important to me are the opinions of people that I respect.
I've learned
So
that.
so if somebody I respect is telling me, "Hey, you're out of line," you need to analyze it.
Yep.
But if some wingnut that's over the top on a on a forum or a website calling you names and calling you whatever, and you're just going, "Man, this guy's a nut bar," I don't take it personal.
No, you can't. You can't. And there's way too many of them out there. But the good news is the pendulum is starting to swing, bro. I mean, logic is starting to come back, and skepticism is starting to make a reappearance. It's going to be a few years before it gets anywhere where it'll really affect anyone's opinion on anything. But it's happening. Sanity is returning to Sasquatch world by bits and pieces.
I believe so, and I hope so. I think that some of the wingnuts are getting bored with Sasquatch. Some of them have moved on to dogmen. Some of them have moved on to different things. Sasquatch became a victim of its own popularity. I think with the shows that made it so popular, it brought in the fringe element. And I think some of them are getting bored, and some of them are moving on to new stuff.
One can only hope. Bill, it's been a fascinating hour here with you. You have to go on to other things, so I'll let you go with my thanks. And we must do this again soon sometime. It's been a real pleasure.
It's been a pleasure anytime. It's always good to talk to reasonable people.
Take care,
Or you
Bill.
have me fooled, one or the other.
Well, if I want to talk to someone unreasonable, there's always Thomas, but yeah. Take care, bud.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, dear listener, that about wraps it up for now. My name is Jerry Matthews. You can reach me at yellowcoyote@telus.net. Thank you for your interest, and until the next time, keep searching.